Today I'll be talking through the process of developing a type and image based design for a relief print. I started by experimenting with a range of different type possibilities. I included some guidelines for myself, so I used a baseline, X height and cap height to help me consider carefully how I'd like to align the letters. And I experimented a little bit with some sort of sans serif options, adding serif and maybe some more cursive possibilities. But as I was doing that, I realized actually what I really wanted to capture was that kind of sense of coziness of being at home in winter. And so for that reason, I chose to change my word. So I changed it to hygge, which is related to feeling sort of cozy and content, and it's a Danish word. So I continued to experiment with the changed word, and I also had a bit of a think about other images that I might consider incorporating. And then I started to think, well, for me, a highlight of winter is always having a nice cup of tea, so I decided to pop the letters inside of a vintage kettle. And I decided to increase the height of the X height than I had on previous planning sketches to make it a bit more playful, and I really like the effect that it had, so I've decided that this is the idea that I'd like to go with for my relief print. So when making prints, there's a range of different products available that you can use. I think I'm going to choose this one today because I'd like it to act a little bit like a stamp, and because this has nice thick edges, it's quite easy to lift by hand. And also it's just very easy to print with. But first, what I need to do is I drew up a larger scale version. Then what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to use some tracing paper to trace a copy, because when I transfer it onto my printing plate, I need it to be inverted. And the reason for that is because otherwise when I go to print, it'll come out backwards, which is not what I want. So I'm just going to go over this. There we go, now I've got a second copy. Now the next part is transferring it onto my plate. Now it depends on what kind of design you're going for. I have an intention to trim my plate so that I can use it for different things. And I'm also keeping in mind that what I actually want to do is for the kettle to be black and the handle to be black, but this is going to be white, so I'll be carving that out. I'm going to be carving all around it. So I'm not too worried about how close it is to the edge for that reason, but if you were having like a border or something like that you wanted to use, then you'd be needing to keep that in mind. And there we go. That's transferred quite nicely. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to trim down my plate. Now, I don't actually have a proper cutting board, so I'm just using a kitchen one, but obviously if you've got the real deal, that probably would be better suited to it. So I'm just measuring across just to get some level of it being even. I personally don't really mind it being a little bit uneven because I'm kind of going for that hand drawn cozy look, but obviously you play to whatever style you are going for yourself. Also, usually a metal ruler is a little bit better, but I'm making do with what I have available. So don't try and cut all the way through in the first stroke. you're going to need to take your time and get through it gradually because they're very thick, these plates. There we go. And I'll use that for various other things, so never waste your materials. Make sure you get plenty of use out of them. Excellent. So the next part, I need to get my cutting tools. Now there's lots of different types of these. The one I have has interchangeable parts. So I tend to like this one simply because it's good for getting nice thin lines. I might choose to switch to something a little bit broader later on. Let's get these ones out so you can have a look. So something like this or this might be more appropriate when I'm trying to do the larger sections. But to start with, I'm going to be doing this quite fine detail, so I'm going to stick with what I had on there. And I might even use a little bit of this if I'm having trouble with some of the details, but I think I'll be able to go pretty much with this the whole time. Now, if you're a little on the clumsy side, sometimes it can be good to get yourself a board that stops this from moving. The main thing to keep in mind is when you're supporting your plate, you're not putting your hand on the top, because then if you slip, you're going to hurt yourself. So when you are doing this, be very controlled and try and keep your hand behind where you're going when you're keeping this stationary. You'll see you'll get these nice satisfying little sections out. It's very therapeutic. Now that I've done the basic carve out of the background, I think I'm going to switch to a slightly broader tool. This is the one that I was using before. I think I'm going to switch to this so I can get a bit more of that background out of there. And also just to kind of help me see a little bit better, I'm going to go back over the part that I want to keep here. Okay, so I had a bit of fun getting all this out. Obviously, there's a few different ways you could do this. I just find the carving really satisfying, but I could also just alternatively cut around it, so it's really acting like a stamp. I'm going to roll with this option for now, and if it turns out a bit too messy, then I can switch it up to this possibility later. So now what I've done, I've switched back to my slightly more precise tool, and I'm going to go through and just tidy it up a little bit and add in my type. Okay, so now it's all carved out. I still have a feeling there's probably some patches that need tidying up a little bit, so I'm going to do a test print next. Okay, so I'm going to create my test print with some block ink. The ink I have is like really old, So we'll see how that goes. I'm just using some more cardboard as the plate to roll on, and a pretty cheap roller that you could just get at any art shop. So I'm just rolling out so that I get an even coat on my roller. That sticky noise is usually a good sign. You've got enough on there. I think they've probably got too much, but that's okay. I'm just going to do my test print on this page in my book. And then I just push it down. Now obviously traditionally I use a printing press to roll it through, but this is getting used more like a stamp for sort of mono prints. There we go. So we can see that there's getting a bit too much transferred from here, so I need to get some little bits and pieces taken out of there. I might want to thicken up the type so that it translates a little bit better. So it's a good thing that I did a test print, so I know where to focus on now. So I've just washed off the bulk of the ink, and I just need to get rid of these little sections that we're picking up and maybe make my letters a little bit thicker so that it translates better in the print. So I'm going to print a good copy into my visual diary so that I can keep coming up with ways to develop it further. I've been considering perhaps doing some marbling behind it, or a watercolor design, maybe combined with some other illustrations related to the whole theme. So that's something I'm looking forward to. So to get me going on that, I'm going to print a copy into my book. And so that's there ready to go for me to develop it further. Hope you found this useful, and obviously if you're going for a more sophisticated aesthetic, then you might want to research a little bit further, but if you're going for a nice, quick, simplistic design, then this is a good approach.